me, Dad, about the devil!
Through the 1960s, American horror cinema went through some major changes. Films like Psycho and Peeping Tom in 1960 brought horror to the modern day and made it feel real. As well as that, there was huge cultural shifts happening through the decade. The Vietnam War, the emergence of youth culture, hippies, civil rights protests, and a growing mistrust in authority. There was a sudden feeling that the real horrors weren't coming from outside, they were coming from within, that we were no longer safe where we live. Thus, the first boom of true modern home invasion horror began. Two films in the 1960s, one in 1964, the other in 67, about women being targeted and invaded by dangerous, murderous outsiders caused huge waves around the world. The first of which caused such shock and controversy that it was banned in certain countries like England for several decades.
Please, help!
The latter, a much more mainstream success, still terrifies audiences to this day and contains what is generally considered to be one of the greatest scares in cinema history. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of home invasion, and we discuss Lady in a Cage and Wait Until Dark. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Munzer. As ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 9th season exploring the evolution of home invasion, and this is part 9. In this week's episode, as that intro suggested, things start getting dark and scary and properly home invasion-y, as this week we are going to be talking about Lady in a Cage from 1964 and Wait Until Dark from 1967. Both of these discussions will be spoilerific. Go and give them both a watch. They're both incredible movies before you listen to our discussion. So joining me to discuss these two bangers, one of my absolute very favourite people, as well as being a regular writer for Rue Morgue magazine and the writer and founder of Final Girl blog. She is also one of the co-hosts of the Gaylords of Darkness podcast, and she was last here in our vampire series discussing Daughters of Darkness and the Blood-Splattered Bride with me. It's a pleasure to have her back. I ventured all the way over to Gaylords Manor to see her. Let's hope that she's in. Stacie Ponder, hello.
Hi, Mike.
Hello. Thank you so much for letting me invade your home here at Gaylords Manor.
Make yourself comfortable if you can.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Wait, I'm just ragging on my own furniture. Wait a minute, that wasn't scary.
Oh, no. It was nice. You had a kind of Vincent Price, make yourself at home kind of vibe. I liked
Finally.
it. Exactly. First of all, Stacie, before we get into anything else, just congratulations, I think, are in order, because you and Anthony on Gaylords of Darkness have just done, at the time we're recording this, you've just wrapped up your re-3ing for charity, right? Which is where you covered a movie every single day and you podcasted for 7 days straight in order to raise money for the Transgender Law Centre. And you raised an insane amount of money, right? You raised like $13,000 for the Transgender Law Centre. So congratulations. You endured a lot of movies throughout that week. So how are you feeling?
Oh, endured is absolutely the right word. At some, like, very early into the process, time ceased to have any meaning, and I'm still not quite sure what day it is.
Oh my god. Because, of course, it's that thing, and you guys talked about this, but it's this very weird thing where with podcasting, right, you have to record it the day before, and then it goes out the day after, so you're kind of always a day ahead of yourself, right? And then it's like, when do you watch the film, when do you record, when do you edit, and then when does it go out? And like doing what you just did, which is like 7 days of that consecutively, I think I would lose all like reality and all time. You know, it's just, that must be an absolute nightmare by the time you're like midway through it.
Oh yeah, we spent a lot of time in the off hours just trying to figure out the schedule and like what we were doing next, because it was like watch a movie and then the next day talk about it and edit it and post it for the following day. So each movie was kind of a 3-day process, but it was every single day of the week. And then also we were updating the fundraiser, which was incredible because everybody was so very, very generous to donate. But we would say on the show, like, okay, we're going to raise the goal to $5,000. But by the time that episode came out, we'd already raised it 2 more times because people were just donating like crazy.
So good. And like you guys watch, like part 3s, right, from horror franchises and series. And obviously you've done this a couple of times before, these kind of fundraisers, right? And so you've ticked off a few of the good ones, right? You've done Exorcist 3, you've done Friday the 13th 3, you've done Halloween 3. Like, so it was so interesting to see what movies you had left to cover this time round.
Yeah, we're getting to the I think we did like Ninja 3 The Domination this time, which
I'd never even heard of that movie, Stacie. Like, amazing.
It's so much fun. It's so good. Anthony had never seen it. And so like that was a treat. Like this iteration of the 3-inning was probably the last good one because next, like all we have left is like Leprechaun, Puppet Master. Like, no offense to anybody who loves those, but we are scraping the part 3 barrel.
Let me tell you, Stacie, I am currently watching the Leprechaun films through for the first time. I know, but Leprechaun 3 is actually so far the best one of the series. So
really?
Make of that what you will. He goes to Vegas. He has a great time. Lots of people get granted wishes. They go, they go comedically wrong. It's a very be careful what you wish for, monkey paw. It's like a Treehouse of Horror episode, basically, is what it's like. I didn't mind it.
Oh, Vegas seems like a good fit for that greedy leprechaun.
Oh, he loved it. You can imagine, right? He absolutely loved Vegas. Yeah, it's... But, I guess you've always got like you can move on to do a 4-inning or a 5-inning or something at some point down the line, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that would be any better, honestly.
No.
Right,
I mean, it would be funny for us to listen to, because, personally, I've got to say, yours might be the only podcast, actually, where I will listen to you guys regardless of whether or not I've seen the movies. And there were some of the movies this week that you guys were covering where I was like, no, I'm not going to watch that. I'll just listen to what these guys have to say about it. But then actually, hearing you guys talk about it, and then I'm like, oh, no, maybe I do need to watch this. Because all of them, you guys seem to really enjoy last week, right?
I actually enjoyed everything last week, which was shocking. Like even Zombie 3. Which could also be Zombie 2 or 4 or 12.
This really confuses me because in the UK we have Zombie Flesh Eaters, right, but it's also called Zombie 2 for you guys, right? Is that right? Or is it called Zombie or is it called both?
I've always known it as Zombie. Right. But it's also Zombie 2, apparently.
So is Zombie 3 the next movie on from that classic 1979 movie? Or is there another one in between them?
Listen, I am not a mathematician. I don't know. I don't have my calculator handy. Like, it's just the zombie series in particular is a mess. And so is the Demons series.
Yes, it is.
Is another mess. They're just... Because the Italians will do whatever. So you say, let me watch that movie, The Dead Eat the Living. And then you find out that that's a title for like 8 different movies.
Yeah.
They just do whatever they want. I kind of love it.
It's so good, isn't it? They don't care. They don't care for story, consistency, character, anything, but they can make the heck out of movies, can't they? That's the thing. We were saying just before we started recording, but I just rewatched Zombie Flesh Eaters or Zombie for another podcast, and like it is still one of the most astonishing things I think I've ever watched in my life, that movie. Like, it's so good.
Oh, it's a favorite. It's a perennial favorite of mine, for sure.
Incredible stuff. But we are going to talk about Home Invasion, which, like, it's like, it feels like the one that whenever I mention it to people, it kind of makes them wince. Like, even hardcore horror fans are like, oh, Home Invasion. I'm not a fan. What do you think of home invasion movies generally, Stacie? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that the movies that you're covering as part of Home Invasion, like, I appreciate that you kind of take an oblique approach to it at times.
Yeah, they're mostly not home invasion.
Yeah. But if you squint, they are, right?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah. Because I'm one of those people who's not a huge fan of it. And I think it's because when I think home invasion, I just think people getting tied to chairs and abused and tortured and all of this. And I'm not a fan of that, despite the fact that I was on this very show talking about how much I love Martyrs, which for a substantial portion of the runtime is just someone tied to a chair being tortured.
Yes, that's very true. Yes.
But I don't know. It just seems a little... It's kind of boring to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, there are so many bad ones that are boring, I think, because, you know, we are, hopefully, what I'm going to be covering are home invasion movies that offer something new and interesting, right? But of course, yes, for every one interesting movie, there are like 100 copycat ones, and it's probably a very cheap movie to make, right? I imagine, especially through the 2000s, it feels like there were loads of guys who just got a bunch of their mates together and filmed some sort of torture in the basement type movie or home invasion type movie that was always quite cheap and scuzzy, and those films are a bit boring, right? Because they're quite formulaic and quite predictable.
Yeah, people show up at the house and then they get in the house and then there's violence. I say, okay, snore. I mean, if there's some kind of twist to it. And I don't mean like M. Night Shyamalan style twist where it was like, oh no, the house is the real victim here, and the family was invading the house. Like, nothing like that. But if it's something like You're Next, I think, where at least there's some sense of cat and mouse to it, that really plays out in an exciting way. But I mean, The Strangers was such a huge example of this, and I watched it and I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I know. It's a movie that I watched once when it first came out, whenever that was, 2008 or something, and I've never felt the need to watch it again. It will be, this will be the second time I've ever watched it for the podcast later on down the line. But yeah, like I remember feeling it was quite powerful, The Strangers. Like when I went to see it really fucked me up. But also, it's never been a movie where I've been like, oh, that's one of my favorites, I'll just pop on The Strangers, like, let's give that a rewatch,
Yeah. Well, I thought that the characters were exceedingly idiotic in that one. Like, I try to, you have to give horror movies leeway with character decisions and the such, but sometimes it's just egregious.
Yeah.
But did you think of The Strangers watching one of the movies we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, and actually, like,
because there's a direct reference.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I don't know if I know the direct reference you're thinking of, but I'm excited to hear about it, because actually these two movies, I mean, like you said, really, I've not been covering home invasion movies up until this point. In fact, I would say this week is actually the first official pair of home invasion movies, or kind of proto home invasion movies, that we're going to discuss. And these movies are awesome, right? These kind of, and I think, even some of the stuff that I'm going to cover just shortly after this, like When a Stranger Calls, or Someone's Watching Me, right? The John Carpenter film, like these, and I guess they're almost slashers, right? These kind of like, woman alone and there's a cat and mouse prowler thing, like you said, like those are the much more fun versions, I find, right, of home invasion.
Right. Yeah. When it just becomes suburban hostel.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm really not interested. So it depends what the point is. Is the point to focus on the torture or the misery of the characters? I'm just not into it.
Have you ever, like, if you don't mind me asking, because I've been asking people about this, have you ever experienced anything of that yourself? Not like an extreme home invasion, but, if you've lived in cities and that kind of thing, have you ever experienced anything creepy like that happen to you, like a break-in or anything like that?
Yes.
Yeah, right, there you go.
It happened. I had an apartment. It was like a basement apartment. And I was on the phone. It was like 12:30 in the morning. And I'm on the phone and somebody started opening my window while I was on the phone.
Oh my God.
And I didn't know what to do. So I just started screaming at them like, get out of here. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And the person just said, is Steve there?
Amazing.
And then they left and I called the police. And by the time the cops got there, the guy was gone, whatever. And because my window didn't lock correctly. So I called my landlord, and then he came the next day and screwed my window shut, which was super helpful.
Yeah, great. Great.
Wait, how am I still alive?
Oh, God, I know.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that the people I've spoken to that have had something like this happen to them generally is in cities. It's in London or New York or whatever. And I think that links to what we're about to talk about with these two films, right? That often, we might consider Home Invasion to be a house in the middle of nowhere or quiet suburbia, but so often, actually, in the real world, it's more likely to happen in a busy apartment block or something.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah, I always think like, In Cold Blood or something, where you're at the remote farmhouse, like that would be the scariest. Yes. But I guess more people, higher chances of something happening.
Yeah, totally, exactly. And I think there are some really interesting ones that have happened that we've gotten over the last few years that, like, one of the things that, and we might talk about this with these two movies actually, but one of the things that I think home invasion movies do at their best is they sort of look at class and that kind of thing, right? Because I guess naturally when you're set in a home, that home is going to be a certain type of space. It's going to be a big affluent home. It's going to be a small, pokey apartment or whatever it might be. And I think some of these films we've had recently, like Us and Parasite, right, are kind of use kind of home invasion in a really interesting way to say something more interesting. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's usually the have-nots coming and invading the space of the haves. Yes.
For
a reason.
Yeah, and I think it's better when those movies are also saying something about the haves. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to just like, oh no, awful poor people are coming for us kind of thing. Yes.
Oh, 100%. I think one of the movies we're going to talk about does that. Surprisingly.
Right. Yes, exactly. So there you go. Well, let's do it. Let's begin talking about these incredible movies. We're going to start with Lady in a Cage from 1964.
Oh my God.
Help! Please, help! I am trapped in small private elevator.
Lady in a cage, locked in her own madhouse of insane intruders, powerless to stop the psychopathic horror that hems her in.
We're gonna kill you, Pop. All of you. You and a human being.
Olivia de Havilland, helpless before the rage of such characters as the wino, half crazed with his own destroying sin. The hustler, a blousy has-been, the most amazing role Ann Southern has ever played. The muscler, lusting for the last wild thrill of killing. The weirdo, a blonde psycho driven to tempt, to taunt, to destroy. The wildo, frenzied by a woman's body or the razor edge of a sharp, glittering knife. They're all in Lady in a Cage, the picture that is not for the weak. And perhaps not even for the strong.
So Lady in a Cage from 1964, it's written and produced by Luther Davis and it was directed by Walter Grauman. I believe it started as an idea by Luther Davis as a play, as a stage play, and then it kind of got adapted from there, right? And this is I would say, like I said earlier, this is the first true home invasion movie that I've covered this series in the way that we would imagine and picture most home invasion movies to be. I think you've got this woman called Cornelia, who we'll talk about, played by Olivia de Havilland. Her son has just left her for a few days for the long weekend. He says he's not going to be back till Tuesday, although he may not actually be back ever, which we'll get into, right? She can't walk and she uses this elevator, this very, very slow elevator to get up and down her stairs. And one day she's midway down the stairs in this elevator, in this cage, and there is a power cut and everything stops and she halts halfway down while her son is away. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of people start invading her house, including a kind of alcoholic hobo, a woman who is described as a hustler, right? She's a sex worker, and then this awful gang of psychopaths, essentially, right? And they are all coming and invading her home in order to steal stuff, and then really nasty violence ensues, essentially. God, what a movie. Stacie, this was the first time I had ever seen this film. I've watched it twice now, but I had only come to it for the first time for the podcast.
Wow. Congratulations.
I adored it. It is officially one of my favourite movies I've watched so far for this series. It is absolutely brilliant and insane. And tell me a little bit about your history with it, Stacie. When did you kind of first come to this movie, and what do you think of it generally? I
came to it surprisingly late. And I think that's because for some reason in my mind, I always conflate it with I Want to Live, that Susan Hayward movie where she plays the prostitute on death row, which I guess technically she is also a lady in a cage, right? So I would think to myself, oh, I've already seen it. I've already seen that. But no, which is shocking because Olivia de Havilland is perhaps my favorite actress. Absolutely my favorite Golden Age actress. Like, I love Olivia de Havilland so much. And so when I finally was like, oh, actually, I've never seen this. And you read the synopsis. And when I put it on and press play the first time, I must have felt, I can only imagine I felt like an Olympic athlete when they step out onto the field, you know, and they're like, I've been training my whole life for this. This is the moment I've been waiting for. And like the crowds are cheering and it's like all of my heart. Yes. I like, you know, leaned back in slow motion. It was just like my whole life has led to this, and it did not disappoint. This movie is incredible. It is one of my favorites. It is one of those movies you just have to see it to believe it, I think.
Why haven't more people seen it? I mean, I don't know if this is just me and I was unaware of it, or if it's less known in the UK maybe than the US, but over here it feels like nobody has really seen this film or spoken about it, and I'm just like, why? Like it should, I think it should be considered like a classic of the genre in a way.
Well, it got highly torn apart on release. Especially Olivia de Havilland did. She got raked over the coals for even doing this movie, and it was banned in the UK until 2000.
Well, maybe that's why nobody's seen it here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so the fact that I think it wasn't readily available everywhere, and it doesn't have the sort of garish, on the surface garishness of like Baby Jane or something, which has become such a cultural touchstone.
Yes. That's really interesting, isn't it? Do you think it owes like this kind of wave we were getting? You know, like me and Anthony spoke about it. I know you kind of talk about them as Grand Dame Guignol films, right? And like, do you think this movie kind of belongs in that ilk? Like, do you think it's due to the success of Bette Davis in Baby Jane, for example, that Olivia de Havilland is in a kind of genre movie like this?
I think so. This wasn't her only dabbling in that genre. She had also done Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte with Bette Davis. And so I would throw this in there, but at the same time, it's different because it's not usually those movies, the Grand Dame Guignol. It's part of the pleasure is seeing a venerable actress as like a crazy psycho axe murderer or something. Yeah. And here she's just pure victim of circumstance and the outside world in all of this. So it's kind of a different take on the subgenre. I think.
It's a really interesting like sort of middle ground between like a movie like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, a kind of Grand Dame Guignol film, and then a movie like Last House on the Left, right? It almost feels like the kind of midpoint, because there's something about that gang of people that burst in that remind me a bit of the gang in Last House on the Left, you know? Like it feels like you can see the seeds here of like proper home invasion starting to begin in this movie as well, but also it's got Olivia de Havilland in it, so it's just so weird.
Right. She's trapped in a small private elevator. Oh my God, this movie. Listen, anybody who's listening to this, if you have not treated yourself to Lady in a Cage, please, look, the world is on fire. Like, you owe it to yourself to spend 90 minutes with Lady in a Cage. I promise.
It is. Also, do you know what I found really funny? Because I shared this with you, that I got a post. I think I had a couple of posts from people on Instagram who listened to the podcast, who, when I announced the films, were like, oh, please get Stacie on for Lady in a Cage. By that point, you had already agreed to do this movie. But I'm like, that's really funny. I don't know, how do you take that, Stacie, that people immediately went to you when they thought of this movie?
I mean, it's an honor. Are you kidding? Also, admittedly, it does put the pressure on, because I can't disappoint. Like, oh my God, my dream came true. And then they listen and I'm just like, I don't know, it was okay.
Yeah, it was fine.
There is pressure, but boy, if anybody in the world thinks that Lady in a Cage and I are a match made in heaven, thank you.
So, where to even begin, Stacie, with this? I even would just want to start in the opening credits, because I really think the directing in this film, Walter Grauman's directing, is brilliant. And there is something, you feel like straight away this movie has something to say. It's got these incredibly stylish kind of Saul Bass credits, right? The music is incredibly dramatic and quite jarring. And then we get these kind of shots of the city that surrounds the house of Olivia de Havilland. And we see traffic, angry drivers. There's an unconscious or maybe dead man in the street. He looks homeless. And a little girl is just kind of like roller skating over his leg and looking at him. Right? And there is this feeling that, oh, this place looks like or feels like a bit of a hellscape, or that something really bad is going to happen here at any moment, you know? I just found it a really astonishing opening title sequence, you know?
Oh yeah, the graphics on the title cards and the music is like beep bump and it's like, am I the lady in a cage? You know, it's wild, and all those scenes of like the ills of society playing out. And I love the woman. There's a car radio with the Tabernacle radio. And a woman is like, "Well, we're going to war. Where's our anti-Satan missile?" Yes. It's so good.
It's so good because it creates this world, and it creates such a mood, and it feels like straight away, it feels like this movie has got something to say. It feels like it's going to be exploring something about this particular place at this particular time, right? I mean, it does feel like, doesn't it, this movie is saying a lot rather than just giving us a very simple, basic home invasion movie, you know?
I think it is, and I think it's really surprising that this is 1964. Because it feels like something that would come out in maybe 69 or 70, which isn't that far off, but it's more predicting what was going to happen, because the 60s and 70s were such a time of social turmoil. And here in the U.S., like JFK had just been assassinated. The Kitty Genovese case had happened earlier in 1964. And so the world that, like, the bucolic 1950s were over. You know, there was the threat of war again, and the Cold War was ramping up and all of this. And the movie is just kind of letting us know everything's going to heck.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And it is a lot of it is just for the contrast of, like, the world is on fire, and then inside the house, everything is fine, darling. And oh, what a genteel kind of existence. But right outside your door, these things are happening, and they're going to be your problem before too long.
Exactly. And this is what's so interesting about the film, right, is that Olivia de Havilland isn't just our protagonist, our heroine. You know, she's a weird character, right? We'll talk about her as we go. But Cornelia, you know, we're introduced to her as being this overbearing mother, this very affluent, but yeah, like you said, kind of ignorant to what's going on around her kind of a person, I think. And, you know, she's just, you know, she makes an offhand comment later to James Caan's character, doesn't she, about, oh, you're who my tax dollars go on then. And like, she says things like, oh, darling, let's hope the stock markets go up so we can go to Paris. And again, there's that feeling of completely unaware of the real world around her, I suppose.
Yes. Oh, I love Cornelia. Okay, I love Cornelia Hilliard. She is amazing. But I think the early on signs and all of those things that she talks about make a point to show the journey that she goes on.
Yes. Because
by the end of it, she is on the same level as these people. And she knows it, and she admits it, and she sees the ways that she was like them before all of this even happened.
Yes. It is really ahead of its time in that regard. Like you said, it's surprising that it's made in 1964. Like, my wife was kind of walking in and out of the room while I was watching it. She was like, what is this? But then also she was like, was this made kind of post, Sharon Tate murder and that kind of thing? I was like, no, but it feels like you said, a movie that should have been made in the late 60s, early 70s, doesn't it? It's really interesting.
Right. It really is reminiscent of the sort of, I really got the Manson vibes from it.
Yeah.
This time, like with the hooligans coming in your house and just like, going on a rampage.
Yeah.
And callously killing you at the end of it. It's wild. It's wild. The violence in this movie is so brutal. That's the thing, too, about the Grand Dame Guignol movies, with the exception of maybe Straight Jacket, the William Castle movie, which this movie to me has big William Castle vibes, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. It's so kind of heightened and sort of over the top, isn't it, as well? Which I love. I love the crash zooms into like the son's letter that's like, I'm going to kill myself and all this kind of
Yeah. But the subgenre, probably with the exception of Straight Jacket, tend to be kind of, there's also a lack of overt violence or like on-screen violence, anything explicit. But then Lady in a Cage just really goes for it.
Yeah, it really does.
It's wild.
It really does. And you can see that people did not take to this film when it was first released.
No.
You can understand it. But watching it now, it's like, holy shit, this film has aged like a fine wine, I think. I think it's incredible.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think audiences now are going to be more appreciative of it just on a surface level of like, this movie is insane. This movie is super violent and a lot of fun and all of this. But also, I think if there was an intentional message, which I think there is, I think this movie does have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I think that was also overlooked at the time of release because it is a trashy kind of... It feels like an exploitation movie.
It does.
Where the novelty was seeing Olivia de Havilland trapped in a small private elevator, But I think critics at the time also were more... A lot of the mainstream critics, at least, were more the voice of the moral society versus engaging in any thoughtful kind of criticism.
Well, we saw it happen even a few years earlier than this with Peeping Tom, right, as well, a movie that is now so widely considered as like a masterpiece, right, that people just could not handle what they were seeing in 1960. And it kind of feels a bit like that with this movie.
Yes. This movie, I think, is definitely a descendant of Psycho. Like, I think the Psycho vibes are very prevalent, especially early on.
Yeah, for sure. What do you? Let's talk about Olivia de Havilland and Cornelia then. Because what an absolute hero she is in this, and what I think it's just so interesting the way that they set her up, because when I first watched it I was like, what on earth is this relationship with her and her son? And to begin with, I didn't know, and I think it's deliberately very ambiguous at the beginning as to whether or not they are even mother and son or if they're a couple, because he's calling her darling, the way that she comes up to him and kind of kisses him and she's smelling his aftershave and like it's so weird. I loved it so much. But what do you make of Cornelia particularly at the beginning here and her relationship with her son?
It's so creepy. It's really creepy. It's definitely a smothering mother.
Yeah. Again, I suppose, like you said, it's quite Norma Bates-esque,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, but instead of sort of, she's sort of the, if Norma Bates is one side of the coin, Cornelia Hilliard is the other, where it's like the result is kind of the same, but one is doing it with much more love and much more affection.
Yes. It's almost like she's the more socially acceptable Norma Bates.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's very creepy, and it's like, either it's incest, like in watching it, you're immediately thinking, well, this is either going to be a psycho and he's going to flip out and start killing people, or this is a weird incestuous relationship, or he's gay.
Right.
And it's shocking to me that the movie actually does kind of go the he's gay route.
Yes. Well, I was going to say it almost does all of those things, actually, doesn't
Right.
it? But you're right. Yeah. Like it pretty overtly states that he's gay, I think, towards the end as well, doesn't it, really? Like in the conversations that she has with James Caan about him and everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The hooligans pick up on it right away. It's like, as soon as they read the letter, they're like, oh, he's gay.
Yeah.
She's like, what? My Malcolm? Like, it's so good. But it's sort of the, like, funhouse exploitation version. I get vibes of Suddenly Last Summer. The Tennessee Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Of the, like, the mother kind of either denying or being clueless that her son is gay.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of thing. It's there. But unfortunately, Malcolm is taken out of the picture early on.
Yes.
But I just love it as kind of a backdrop to everything that's going on.
So good. And Malcolm, who is desperate to get away from his mother and threatens to kill himself. Like
Drama queen.
Absolute drama queen. Everyone in this film is so, as the kids say, extra, right?
Oh,
Everyone is so
yeah.
extra in this film.
Oh, shit. It's Cornelia. I mean, be still my heart. She fancies her. I don't know how much she dabbles in poetry, but she definitely thinks she's a poet.
She loves her little poems.
And everything, like her little voiceovers are so dramatic when she's like trapped in the elevator, and she's like, if the lights go out, this will be a tomb. Like she just has the most dramatic inner monologues, and I just love it.
So good. And of course, Olivia de Havilland was like, a huge name by this point, wasn't she? Like she had been acting, I guess kind of like with people like Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, right? She'd been acting since like the 1930s, I think, right? Hadn't she by this point? And obviously quite a very well-respected kind of prestigious actress.
Oh, yes. Yeah, very prestigious. She had done a lot of, she'd won Oscars at this point and had done some incredible films. And so I think that's part of the reason why she was so castigated over this was like, it's a crazy film. And it's like, the movie just constantly is increasing the lunacy, and it's like she's in an elevator with like a sweaty bosom. It's like, Olivia de Havilland, what are you doing? Like that's I can only imagine the reception in the day.
So good. I love that she did this movie though. How cool is it that she did this movie? And apparently she had a great time making it, didn't she? And she said James Caan was great to perform with, and I think she had quite a positive experience making this movie, apparently.
Yeah, I never read that she had a bad word to say about it at all.
Yeah.
I'm Olivia de Havilland. You see me in these pleasant surroundings, safe, secure. But am I really? Are you? There's a side of life we tend to ignore, the world of humans so callous, so degraded they are worse than animals. My new picture, Lady in a Cage, explores that world. It's a strong picture with a terrifying theme which affects us all. That's why I urge adult, responsible people to see Lady in a Cage. You will be shocked, you will be terrified, and fascinated.
And I think, I don't know, part of the Grand Dame Guignol tradition is like, there are certain audiences that are going to take great pleasure at watching the formidable, venerable actress kind of be humiliated.
Yes.
Like, I think that is never my takeaway in any of these movies. I love watching these powerhouse actresses do something really weird. That's the joy for me. It's not like, oh, I really want to see, so-and-so tortured by kids. Like, that's going to be great. Ha look what she gets. Like, that's never my experience.
I know. They take these roles and they own them, right? And they are these films. Like, they literally are these films, these women that star in these, Grand Dame Guignol movies. And, I think she's just amazing in this. And I love that, apparently Hedda Hopper wrote like a scathing review and said this picture should be burned. And then, and she wrote, why did Olivia do it? Why? And it's just like, it's brilliant. I love that she did this. And, she is one of those actresses. Do you have like a favorite Olivia de Havilland, performance or movie?
probably The Heiress.
Oh, I've not seen The Heiress.
Oh, she is astonishing in that. That I love. My Cousin Rachel. She's amazing.
That is such a good movie, isn't it?
Yeah. God, The Snake Pit is another good one. Like, I think she's one of the most capable actresses in terms of nuance. And it even comes out in this movie that she can go through 6 emotions in a 7-second shot.
Oh my God, I love her face acting when the voiceover is reciting poetry, and her face is kind of reacting to what she's saying and stuff as well. She's so good.
There's one where the hooligans have been there for a while, and she hears the bathtub water come on, and the monologue says, "Is someone taking a bath?" and her face is like, "Huh." Yeah. Okay, yeah, they're taking a bath. Yeah. It's so amazing. It's so good.
I love it. And I love that moment as well. And we'll talk about all the invaders in a minute, but the moment when she clocks that one of them is a woman as well, and she's like relieved, right? She's like, oh my God, there's a woman here. You're a woman. Like, she's so relieved to see that one of these people that's invaded her home is actually a woman.
She thinks that, their common sex is going to form some kind of a bond. Yeah. But little does she know that Lady in the Cage it's one of the things I love about it is that it's just like a matryoshka doll of villains.
Yes.
Like, every time you think you've gotten to the top villain, there's someone worse coming.
It's incredible, right? But yeah, she's an amazing actress. And of course, like me and Anthony talked about this with Betty and Joan, of course, but there is this famous rivalry between Olivia de Havilland and her sister, right, as well, Joan Fontaine. Oh, yeah. We've also spoken about Joan Fontaine this series because we've done Rebecca, of course, and even, apparently the stories go that even on the set of Rebecca, Olivia de Havilland was filming something in the next studio or something, and Alfred Hitchcock would invite her into the studio to watch just to make Joan Fontaine even more uncomfortable, to get more out of her in that performance, because she hated having her sister watch her act. But I love this kind of lifelong hatred that these two apparently had for each other. Hilarious.
It's insane. Wasn't it? Did Joan Fontaine say she's gonna hate me because I'm gonna die first or whatever? It's just. There's rumors. Aren't there rumors that Olivia de Havilland tried to kill Joan Fontaine when they were children?
I love it.
I think that's even part of it. It's just historic. It's so good.
Oh my God. She died. Is this right? She died in 2020, aged 104. That's astonishing. Oh, yeah. That is astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my God.
She's one of the last. Of that era. She was one of the last that we had. So
amazing. Absolutely amazing. So yeah, we've got Mad Cornelia in this house. I also love her actual cage, this really slow elevator that goes up and down, this private elevator.
Oh my God, I love that it's so slow and such a pain in the butt that she brings a book. Yeah. With her. She's like, well, while I go from the 3rd floor to the 1st, I'll turn on my radio and read my book for a while.
It's so true. So good. And it's got that kind of... This movie has a kind of jarring sound design in the way that... I spoke about this bit with Baby Jane. When Baby Jane, there's that incessant buzzing that, that Joan Crawford is kind of, buzzing for her sister constantly. This movie has this with this bell that she keeps ringing from the elevator, right, as well. It's so loud. On the TV I was watching it on, it was 10 times as loud as the dialogue. So I was turning up the volume to hear some of the dialogue, and then I was shitting myself every time she let off that bell noise. It was
Yeah, you've got to keep your finger hovering over the mute button for a little while with this one. Yeah, but at least there's visual cues. It'll be ringing and driving you crazy, but also just the picture is just entirely the bell ringing also. So.
Oh, it's great. What do you think of the home itself then? I mean, something I've been asking people each week is about kind of the way these filmmakers use the space in the horror, right? Obviously, especially with home invasion, it's such an important part of it. This house that we spend this entire film with, and the way in which the director kind of guides us around this kind of house. What do you sort of make of it generally?
I think it's pretty amazing, actually. Especially, I watched Wait Until Dark, the other movie we're going to talk about. I watched that one first. And this one is such a contrast to that one.
Yes.
The way it uses the space, and somehow it's largely in the living room area. And Olivia de Havilland is in a box the entire time, and yet there is never a dull moment in this movie. There is no downtime at all. You never get tired of the space that they're in. You never wish that they were somewhere else. It's just, it really holds your attention from beginning to end, and the stakes keep getting raised higher and higher and higher while we're in this really limited space. It's incredible filmmaking, I think.
I think it is as well. It's amazing, actually, because one of the things that's kind of cropped up with a lot of these movies is that they're often, because they are sort of set in one place, they're often based on plays, you know, like Dial M for Murder and movies like that. They're either based on stage plays or they are kind of written by playwrights. I think this movie was like originally conceived as an idea for a play. But this movie never feels kind of stagey in that regard, does it, really? Like, it doesn't feel like, it feels so cinematic in the way that we're kind of like put in this space.
Yes. You know? Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you mentioned it earlier with like the zoom in on the letter. Like, there's a lot of like the cinematography and just the shots that are chosen for this really keep things interesting and exciting. There's extreme close-ups, then we get a wide shot, then we get a zoom, then we get, you know, it's really, from shot to shot, it can be frenetic, like not in a way that's distracting, but in a way that just keeps us engaged, I think, versus something else like the other movie we're going to talk about, which definitely feels like it is limited rather than just happening, I guess.
Yeah, the next movie we're going to talk about feels a lot more like almost like a stage set, where it's almost like they've removed a fourth wall, right? And we're just looking in at these three walls of an apartment kind of thing. Whereas this movie never feels like that, right? You really get a gauge of the space. And also, it's quite creepy sometimes. Like, I love some of these zooms. I love the moments of tension when she's trying to answer the phone with her stick and everything, right? But also that moment when she first clocks the guy, the sort of old wino, is in her house. There's that really chilling, I think, moment when she looks down and she just sees his eye peering through the door, staring straight back at her, and there's that crash zoom on it. It's genuinely quite shocking and frightening, I think.
Oh, that shot is some Black Christmas shit. Like, it's right out of there, yeah. Oh, yeah, the moment of... It's definitely got the vibes of like when you're home at night and everything is quiet and then you hear a noise.
Yes.
And you immediately are tense and like trying to figure out, where is it coming from? What is it? Like, that feeling of anxiety, I think, comes across really well, even though it's broad daylight and she's in her own home and all of this. But yeah, when she realizes there's someone else in the house. And I also think it's really interesting that, like, part of this is, you know, the power's gone out and that's why the elevator is stuck. And so the air conditioner is off and it's a sweltering hot day. And it's one of those hot days where it feels like the world is going crazy.
Yes.
You know, like murder rates go up, all of
Yes.
this. Crime goes up because everybody's just miserable. And so it's that kind of day and she's trying to cope in the elevator. And so she has undone her blouse a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it's really... such a wonderful touch that she hears the crash and there's someone in her house. And one of the first things she does is retie her scarf.
Right.
Like, she goes back immediately to the sort of genteel matriarch of the house.
Yeah.
Even in this crazy situation.
Oh, I know. And she's so polite to them to begin with, isn't she? Like, she genuinely is trying to be nice to these people, hoping that they're going to help her. Even when she sees them kind of walk up the stairs, she's sort of trying to talk to them and trying to reason with them, isn't she? Constantly, at the beginning, at least. And I was kind of thinking to myself, yeah, this is probably exactly the way I would have tried to be with them as well.
Right.
You know?
Try to appeal to their better nature. Yeah. Ask them for help. I mean, one of the lines is, you know, haven't you ever needed help?
Yeah.
And it's such a weighted line. Like, we'll get to it, but it's like, it's, you know, she says it to Anne Southern's character.
Yeah.
And there's another beautiful moment from Ann Sothern there, who turns in also like almost a movie stealing performance, I think.
Yes. Let's talk about these other characters then that invade this home. And the first one we get it's George Brady, right? Is that his name? George L. Brady Jr., I believe, is his character name, right? Yeah. The Repent Man, basically, played by Jeff Corey, who's our sort of the first invader in this movie. What do you think of him?
Oh boy, it's a subtle performance. He comes in.
He's like Crazy Ralph, isn't he? He's got Crazy Ralph vibes.
Yeah, there's no other word to describe him except hobo. Like, he is your stereotypical movie hobo. Like, I'm surprised he's not riding the rails. Like, he literally has a bindle and, the floppy tie, and he's just missing, like, the oversized daisy in his pocket. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
But he comes in and it's like, he spots the booze and is like, waka, waka, waka. Like, he's just like wagging his tongue and his eyes are bulging and he's licking his lips and it's so over the top.
Yeah, it is. It's larger than, everything about this film is larger than life, right? There is no subtlety, it feels like, in this movie, but it works. And so we're introduced to him. He's the first person that breaks into the house, but he seems like he's fairly harmless in a way, because it's like, well, what can this old drunk do, And then he goes and calls on the help of his friend Sade, played by Ann Sothern, right? And so she's the next kind of invader that arrives at the house at this point. And again, like you said, a really interesting character, quite ahead of its time, I think, and another astonishing performance here, right, from Ann Sothern. Yeah,
it's amazing to me that this movie affords, especially like the Ann Sothern's character, there's such rich characters. Like, they could easily just be written off as just like a home invader, the end.
Yes.
But we get so much with her and even with George, where he goes to her because he recognizes that he's weak and he won't be able to steal anything from the house because he'll be too focused on the booze.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like we have this, like, these two characters have some kind of a history. And it's amazing to me that they're so well drawn.
They have a kind of interesting, almost friendship, don't they, clearly, where he sort of comes to her and she sort of rolls her eyes at him, but also she sort of wants to help him. Like, there is almost something kind of, I don't know, she's almost a little bit maternal towards him or looks after him, but then also he gets a bit creepy and gross with her at times, but then she's just kind of like, oh, George, like, it's a really interesting kind of dynamic that they have. That you're right, like in a lot of other movies, they wouldn't put the time in to kind of give you that dynamic between these two characters. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think it gives you enough that we can really fill in a lot of blanks to their backstory and all of this. And it just, I don't know, it just makes the movie that much better.
Definitely. And, that even though that these people are breaking and entering into this house, I don't feel the same way about Sade as you do later with the other people that break in, right? She doesn't seem like a villain as such. This idea, like you said, of this kind of escalating villainy. But actually, as it turns out, almost none of them are completely one-dimensional evil, right? But particularly Ann Sothern's character, you want her to be okay,
Yeah, from something I read was that there, perhaps in the original script or something, her character was supposed to get killed. But that was seen as maybe a step too far for even this cuckoo crazy movie. And so she just kind of is locked in a closet and that's the end of her. But we can hope she got out and everything's fine. Yeah,
because I think there's that real fear, I think, because James Caan is really good too, and that you really do feel like this guy is, and actually all three of this lot are dangerous, as well. So I think that's like a really powerful element to this film, that when everyone else is stuck in this house with James Caan particularly, is that you just feel like none of them are safe from this point onwards, basically.
Yeah. Well, when they've all the hooligans have said like they're not afraid of the electric chair. When James Caan is like, that if that's the worst they're going to throw at us and you're not afraid of it, then there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Which is scary.
Well, they are. This lot are scary as well, aren't they? Like the three kind of psychopaths that burst in. So we get Randall, played by James Caan. It's an introducing James Caan credit. It's his first role, right? We've also got Essie, played by Rafael Campos, who is... sort of slowly emerges as maybe one of the most unhinged and dangerous characters of all of them. But then also Elaine, who is James Caan's girlfriend, played by Jennifer Billingsley, right? When these three characters, Randall, Elaine, and Essie, when they arrived, when they sort of burst into the house and they're screaming and yelling and they've got stockings on their face and they're, so they look all kind of weird and uncanny, it is a terrifying moment.
It's a total jump scare.
Yeah.
It's a total jump scare because you're so transfixed by what's already going on and it's already bad.
Yeah.
At the Hilliard residence. And then they come bursting in with their masks and screaming and yelling, and it's the camera, you can't see what's going on, and it's just, it really is disorienting.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful and completely terrifying.
Oh my God. James Caan, one of his earliest performances in this as well. Like, what do you think of him?
He's really great in this. There's definitely, I feel like he watched a lot of Brando.
Definitely, yeah.
Right?
100%. There's a bit of Brando in Streetcar Named Desire almost in this film, isn't there? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think he's really great in it, though, and you see why he would go on to... he's really charismatic and is really, I guess, he and Elaine have some kind of a relationship, and it's heavily implied, at least, that they're going to go off and have sex at one point.
Yeah.
But he's such a sexual person in this that there's always that kind of air about him. Which is also another level of threat when it comes to the other characters.
Yeah, there's a lot of, female gaze on him, I would say, right? Don't you think? He spends so much of this film with his shirt off, and the way in which Elaine is looking at him. There's that great shot where he's just kind of perched on the edge of the bathtub with his shirt off, and she's in the bath, but there's a little mirror that is showing us her facial expression as she's looking up at him and everything. And there's a real kind of interesting portrayal of him as this kind of terrifying psychopath, but also this kind of hunk as well, right?
Right. Oh yeah, there's a big crotch bulge front and center.
Yeah.
At one point, they make no bones about it. And I think it adds a really interesting dynamic later on between him and Cornelia, is that there's some kind of sexual chemistry between the two of them.
That is one of my favorite moments of the film, and one of the weirdest moments of the film, when he is in the cage with her, right? Which I'll talk about in a minute. But actually, first of all, everything that progresses from there is when it feels like we're in real, home invasion horror, right? They're locking the doors, they're attacking each other. When he attacks, the way that poor George gets treated from this point onwards is pretty brutal, right? And the moment when he is killed and stabbed is a really strange scene, isn't it? That moment where we're focusing in on Anne Southern's character because she's sat on the armchair and it's happening just behind the chair, and we see the knife stabbing him and everything. It's there's something about it that is, even though it's kind of over the top, I found it pretty disturbing and upsetting, this stuff,
Oh, it really is. It's not shown at all, but just the way it's framed is brilliant. We have Anne Southern, like you said, it's happening behind her, and she can hear it, and then we get the shots of Cornelia in the elevator who can see everything, and just their two performances... So much plays out on their faces, and it's really, really horrifying. And it's think this kind of movie, it's got such a campy concept, and I think there definitely is the element of camp. I don't know if you know Amy Sedaris, but she did a takeoff on this on her show. There's definitely humor in the whole thing. But at the same time, it's also very sad and very disturbing. And the way these characters who are on the fringes, especially George and Sade, that's the Anne Southern's character, the way they're just on the fringes of society, and society has kind of passed them by. And just meeting these really awful ends is really heartbreaking.
Yeah, and we get little glimpses into the sort of outside world, right, around this house. And it feels like it's not a great area that they live in, right, that she lives in. It's really interesting. There's that feeling it reminded me a little bit of Wes Craven's People Under the Stairs or something, that there's this huge house owned by this rich white person that is maybe in the middle of this more deprived area, right? And that kind of feels like that message is kind of there in the background of this movie a little bit, you know. But I think it's interesting, isn't it? Those little glimpses we get of what life is like outside this house and in the street, you know.
Oh yeah, you wonder if it's how much of the neighborhood has changed around her.
Yeah.
And that's part of the whole theme of it, of her being completely unaware of what's going on outside and just kind of clueless and in her own world.
And their relationship, like, yeah, Randall's with Cornelia's is really interesting from the very start, isn't it? I think, you know, like it almost seems like he's kind of fascinated by her in a weird way, and the way they interact with each other. And then that brilliant moment when he gets in the cage with her and reads the letter from her son. And I don't know, the way that he reacts to it is like, it strikes something personal into him, right? That maybe he had issues with his mother or something. Like it feels like there's just a lot of texture there in that moment between the two of them, isn't there?
Right. For somebody who Randall has completely written himself off. Like, she earlier tries to appeal to his better nature, and he tells her basically, I have no better nature. I've been, in and out of juvie since I was 9. Mm-hmm. I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like, that's the end of it. But when he's in the elevator with her, with the letter and all of this, I don't know if it's just James Caan and his performance or what, but you see glimpses of him maybe thinking back on the ways that his life could have gone.
Yes.
And it's like, he's attracted to this woman as a woman, but also as a mother. It's like, yes, she was overbearing and all of this, but maybe his mother was completely neglectful and he never knew who she was or whatever. And you just see him kind of playing what if with himself, I think.
Yes, and there is an almost sexual chemistry between the two of them, right? While they're like crammed together in that cage, she's all hot and sweaty, and like again, like you said, the way that the camera, there's a lot of like his crotch just in frame, like prominently in frame and stuff, isn't there as well? And I think all of that, again, it's like I was like, wow, this is some really interesting subversive stuff for 1964. You know?
It really is. It really is. And I think he's attracted to the fact that, like, she's disgusted by him. And so he plays into that with all the, like, burping at her repeatedly. He plays into that. But also, she's not afraid of him.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of incredible. Throughout the entire movie, she kind of blows him off. And it's like, all right, fine, you're a piece of shit, whatever. Like, take the stuff and get out. And I think that's even when he's in the elevator, which should be a moment of true threat. Is he going to kill her, beat her up, rape her? Like, what's going to happen? And she's only focused on her son and the letter.
Well, yeah. And Essie, in some ways, the Raphael Campos character, who is a little bit more kind of cartoonish than James Caan's character, right? He emerges as maybe the most dangerous and frightening and outwardly violent character, I suppose, in out of all of them, doesn't he? I think, but he has less nuance about him than James Caan's character.
Oh yeah, but is he in love with Randall? That's my question.
Oh, I love it. Maybe he is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say that's maybe these three are in some sort of weird throuple. Maybe that's what's really going on. You know,
right?
I love it. And what an amazing last 10-15 minutes where they're really going at each other. She stabs him in the eyes, and that crawling out onto the porch, and then everything that happens in the road at the end, like so good, isn't it? It just amps up. It's brilliant. You think you've seen everything, and then you get to the last 10 minutes of this movie. Oh, where I mean, yeah, stabbing out his eyes, Oedipus much, right? It's not subtle, right? Okay, and just getting that gore shot of it, and then getting the gore shot of his head being half flattened at the end. Oh. God, I know. I was like, are they going to show us it? Yes, they actually fucking showed us it. This is amazing. Yeah. It's so crazy. It's just so crazy right until the final moments. And all those people gathered around as Cornelia is just like screaming and crawling across, like, it's just like so good. So good. Oh, yeah. Once she because, she's in the elevator because she broke her hip and she's on the mend. And so that's part of it. You see her terror at several points throughout this of like, I could just jump out of the elevator, but I'm going to break my hip again.
And so then at the end, when she finally just goes for it, and it's wild. And Olivia de Havilland slithering across like a marble floor, you know?
What more could you want?
What more could you want? Like, thank you, Hollywood. Thank you, movies.
I know. I'd like to see more stuff like this. I'd like to see Meryl Streep do like an exploitation movie now. Let's see it, you know?
She could never. She could never. Oh my gosh.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Well, how do you, I mean, it's going to be 60 years old next year. How do you think it kind of holds up? Is this still a movie that, you know, you feel like you would recommend to horror fans today?
I recommend it to horror fans. I honestly am considering, now that like talking about it, of course, gets me all excited. And so I'm considering just going out later and just recommending it to every person I see.
Yeah.
Like, it holds up 110%. 110% this movie holds up. I think it's crazy. It's got some humor. It's got incredible performances. You will constantly be saying to yourself, like, this was 1964?
It's really interesting. And then what an amazing, again, like, it's fascinating. One of the reasons I love kind of doing this on the podcast is seeing that kind of through line of what an interesting kind of stepping stone between movies like Sunset Boulevard and Baby Jane, where you've got these brilliant older actresses doing this stuff in these big old houses. And then the gritty, nasty home invasion stuff that we got so much of from the 70s onwards. And this movie is that exact weird kind of mesh of the two, isn't it? In a weird way. And the home invasion stuff particularly feels so modern and ahead of its time, you know?
Well, that's what, to bring it back to The Strangers, what's the one like line of dialogue that everybody takes away from The Strangers? Which is when they're like, why are you doing this to us? And the masked people say, because you were home.
Yeah.
And in this one, George says to Randall, why us? And Randall says, because you're here.
Yes, of course.
It's like, this movie is so formative for home invasion.
It is. It really is.
Crazy.
It's crazy. Well, we should probably move on shortly, but Stacie, is there anything more? Have we kind of covered everything there is to cover for now for Lady in a Cage?
Oh my God. I've just cracked the surface on this one, okay? Like, this could be a 5-hour episode. I could just talk about Lady in a Cage forever. There's so much to this movie.
I know. Well, please do. Is there anything that we particularly have missed? Anything else you want to say before we move on, Stacie? Please do.
Well, I mean, just getting it, like, thematically, the whole, you know, part of it is, like, I mentioned the Kitty Genovese case, which happened here where, you know, a woman was murdered in a courtyard outside of her apartment. And famously, the newspaper reported the next day that 35 people heard her screaming for help and nobody helped her. Like, this changed laws. It helped pave the way for the 911 emergency phone, all of this. It turns out that the paper, fudged those numbers and fabricated the story and tried to kind of jazz it up a little bit. Some people did try to call for help, etc.
Right.
But and then, like, psychiatrists and psychologists would reference that to talk about the bystander effect, you know?
Wow, yeah.
And that happened maybe 6 months before this movie came out. And this movie is also the bystander effect in full effect from the beginning, where you get that shot of the dead dog in the street.
Yes.
Which everybody's just driving by, dead dog, like somebody's pet is dead in the road, and everybody's just driving by. Everybody's really callous and unaware of what's going on. And the dead dog completely reflects and predicts what's going to happen to James Caan. Like, the same thing happens at the end of the movie. But I love that while Cornelia, when the hooligans break in and she's like, oh, you're the result of the welfare state and my taxes pay for you and all of this. But by the end, she realizes that she is just like them. Not only in that in her desperation, she descends to kind of a state of madness and violence to get herself out of it. But in her relationship with her son, she realizes that she also is indifferent to the suffering of someone else. And it was right there in her home. And yes, she was smothering him with love, but she didn't realize the effects that she had on him, just as the whole world isn't realizing the effects that we have on other people and everything. There's like the butterfly effect of the Malcolm, her son, hitting the electric line with his car on the way out, which leads to her in the elevator. And it's like everything is interconnected.
Yes.
And, you know, as a society, we all play these parts in each other's lives. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's really fascinating, the big picture of this movie.
I love that. It's so true. And of course, the title too. I mean, like, obviously, apart from literally talking about this cage that she's in, there is this feeling that this whole house is that too, right? That she's kind of trapped away from everyone else that, you know, that's outside in that regard. And, you know, even that it feels like there's so many layers to this idea of the quote unquote lady in the cage in this kind of a world, you know, as well. And like, yeah, there's so much fascinating stuff going on.
Yeah, I think you could take it. There's a definite, I think, conservative, shall we say, read to this movie of like the genteel white woman whose home is invaded by the hooligans and et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
But I think for me, it reads kind of the opposite of that. It's like, we're all the same and don't write somebody off because of their background. And you know, like a society, if it have like the ills of society and the problems that we have aren't just relegated to, you know, quote, the welfare state. It's going to get to you eventually as well. So don't turn a blind eye to the ills of the world and the suffering of everybody else around you.
Yeah. The conservative version of this movie would be not giving us those moments of true characterization between characters like Sade and George and Randall, and it would not be making Cornelia as weird and creepy as she is, right? But I think all of those extra layers absolutely give it something more than just that very basic kind of hooligans attacking a nice lady in her house, right? Like, I think this movie's got so much more on its mind than that, which is what makes it so good.
Yeah, I think at the end when Essie and Elaine get caught and are driven away and she's like, monsters and murderers and you're monsters. But just a moment before, she had the realization, I'm a monster.
Yeah.
It's like there's no separation between her and them, really.
Oh, it's so good, isn't it?
I love it. Who knew a movie with Olivia de Havilland trapped in a cage suspended over her living room could be so rich?
Hello everyone, just interrupting this week's episode momentarily to thank this week's sponsors. That's $20 Patreon subscribers, John and Jenna. John and Jenna sent me a little message, which I'm going to read out now. They said, "Hi Mike, we are big fans of your podcast and would like to thank you for the amazing content you put out about the films we love so much. We have been subscribers to the show for some time, and recently we decided to start a podcast ourselves. It's called the Fear Response Podcast, and it focuses on horror cinema through a mental health lens. We're both mental health workers with different vantage points in the field. As we discuss the films and shows that we love, we also unpack mental health themes presented therein. Fans of horror understand the psychological themes present in all the best horror films, and discussing these as we reflect on our favourite horror properties is always a lot of fun. We have an exciting segment coming up called Virgin Sacrifice. One of our good friends has agreed to watch The Babadook with us and discuss the experience. He's terrified of horror films, and this will be his first since seeing Signs in theatres. Amazing. We invite anyone interested in horror, mental health, or both to join us as we discuss different films and shows on each episode. Listeners can also reach out to us on Instagram at the Fear Response Podcast. Thank you so much to John and Jenna for that lovely message, and thank you so much for being a $20 Patreon subscriber. That podcast sounds amazing. Consider me subscribed. I'm finding it on my app right now and hitting subscribe. I can't wait to have a listen to it. Sounds like a really, really interesting perspective there to bring to the horror genre. So I can't wait to get stuck in, and I'm sure many, many other EOH listeners will also be really interested to check that out. So just to repeat that for John and Jenna, it's called the Fear Response Podcast, which I'm assuming you can get wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow them on Instagram at the Fear Response Podcast. One more time, a huge thank you to this week's sponsors, $20 Patreon subscribers, John and Jenna. And if you want to be an official Evolution of Horror sponsor, just like John and Jenna, get your own little dedicated segment on a podcast episode just like this, then you simply need to sign up to our Patreon at a $20 level. Patreon.com/Evolution of Horror.
Hi, Carrot. It's Mom. I'm just calling to say that I'm so excited to see you tomorrow. You're my angel, and I love you. Okay. I love you. Okay, bye, sweetie. I love you.
Are you at the airport?
I'm on my way. It's not safe, is it? What do you think I should do?
I'm sure you'll do the right thing, sweetheart.
That was a little clip you heard just there from the new Ari Aster movie, Beau is Afraid. Now, everyone has an opinion on this film, it feels like. For people that have seen it, the opinion is divided and it's quite extreme. I've spoken to some people who think it's a masterpiece, other people who think it's total shit. So if you want to hear what I thought of this film, then you can sign up to our Patreon, because I was joined by Faculty of Horror's very own Alex West, and we discussed the movie in depth. So if you want to hear our full in-depth review and a little Faculty of Horror Evolution of Horror crossover event, then sign up to our Patreon at a $5 level, patreon.com/Evolution of Horror, and that Beau is Afraid review will be dropping soon. $5 per month will get you access to at least one new episode every month and a whole back catalogue of other episodes, but if you sign up at a $10 level, you will get a new episode every single week. We've got mini seasons, we've got all sorts of things going on. Director retrospectives. At the moment, we're doing a Final Destination retrospective, which is really fun, going through all of those films one by one. We've got an upcoming episode for $10 patrons on Japanese horror, and we're going to be discussing Battle Royale, which is very exciting. As well as our monthly Fresh Blood Strand, which I do with Brad and Louise and Becky, where we discuss all of the new releases and recommend a bunch of stuff spoiler-free every single month. So if you want to get access to all of that content, sign up. Patreon.com/Evolution of Horror. Everybody who signs up, no matter what tier, will also get a little shout out on the main podcast as a thank you. Speaking of, I'm going to give everybody who signed up in the month of April a very special thanks. So a big thank you to Daisy Day, Devon Marino, Miko Holopainen, Nick Schuett, Daniel Steen, Sophia Sayacek, Kips Moriarty, Andy C, James V, Ellen Gilroy, David, Benjamin Schmidt, Max Sornick, Rebecca Gregory, Christopher Bunsen, Tom Swan, Sarah Sachs-Fithian, Nicole Warren, N. Ken, Wukadu, Charles Craig, Jacob Goff, Samuel, Rebecca Carpenter, Mum and Mac, Martin Nielsen, Wendy Flick, Colleen O'Halloran, Maureen Carroll, IJB, Efrat, Brendan Petit-Young, Daniel O'Reilly, Karen B, Claire Coakley, Shannon Keys, Wendy Rank, Hewlett Packard Lovecraft, Kelly Talley, Elrose Mugan, Adam Armstrong Yu, Dan B, Georgie Jones, and Marie Claude. A huge thank you to all of those people for signing up to Patreon in the month of April. And one more time, if you want to join them and get treated to regular bonus content and more, then sign up now. Patreon.com/Evolution of Horror.
I think that massive doses of Videodrome signal will ultimately create a new outgrowth of the human brain, which will produce and control hallucination to the point that it will change human reality. After all, there is nothing real outside our perception of reality, is there?
Oof, that was a little moment you just heard there from the spectacular Videodrome by David Cronenberg. That is a real 5-star masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. And that film turns 40 years old this year. Can you believe it? And to celebrate that, we are coming to Cardiff to host a very special 40th anniversary screening of Videodrome at the Chapter Arts Centre. So if you are in or within reach of Cardiff, I would love to meet some Welsh Evolution of Horror listeners. Please do come along on the 11th of June. That's a Sunday at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We are going to be screening Videodrome on the big screen at the Chapter Arts Centre, and it will be followed by a very special panel discussion. I'll be joined by some very special guests to discuss the movie and a live podcast afterwards. And then we're going to be out on the town in Cardiff. Come and join us. Head to evolutionofhorror.com/events. On that page, you will also see details of a whole bunch of other screenings we've got coming up. We're at Birmingham, London, Bath, Reading, Cardiff, and very soon we will be announcing a northern tour. People are asking us a lot about this, and we are going to be coming to Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, Edinburgh, York, and a couple of other places later on this year. So again, if you want to be kept up to date on all of our events and what we've got coming up, keep an eye on evolutionofhorror.com/events, or you can sign up to our newsletter, and that's where you'll be the first to hear. evolutionofhorror.com/newsletter, and sign up to be the first to hear so you don't miss out on tickets. That's evolutionofhorror.com/newsletter. Okay, let's dim the lights, lock the doors, and return to this week's episode as Stacie Ponder and I get into 1967's Wait Until Dark.
Gloria?
She is blind, and she is alone, with a terrible suspicion growing.
Gloria, I know you're there.
So, Wait Until Dark. This is a movie from 1967 starring Audrey Hepburn. It's directed by Terence Young, who was famous at the time for having directed a bunch of Bond films. He made Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball. So basically those first three Bond films were directed by Terence Young. And I think you can tell that this movie does have a lot more of a kind of mainstream sensibility, you know, definitely designed as a bigger blockbuster for a larger audience than, for example, Lady in a Cage, right? So basically the story is Audrey Hepburn plays a blind woman called Susie, whose husband is away for a couple of days, left her on her own in the flat. She is unaware that she has in her possession a doll, this kind of MacGuffin at the centre of this story. This doll is actually stuffed with heroin inside, and there are a bunch of drug dealers and gangsters and con men who need to get hold of that doll and need to figure out where in the apartment it's hidden. So in a sense, what we see then is play out is this kind of dramatic irony where we know the baddies are baddies and that they are conning Susie, but Susie doesn't know. And we're watching as Susie slowly starts to piece together this mystery of who are these men really that are coming round and visiting her for various different reasons. And the film kind of slowly kind of ramps up the tension. It gets darker and darker as it goes on, and it culminates famously in a terrifying final act in which Susie faces off against our main villain played by Alan Arkin in a terrifying set piece in the dark, right? And that is, we'll talk about that scene in depth, I'm sure, but that whole sequence is still regarded as one of the all-time great kind of tension and jump scare set pieces, isn't it? So it's a lot of fun. I know a lot of people really enjoy this movie. I saw this film when I was young and really enjoyed it. It was interesting to rewatch it in this context. But Stacie, what about you? I get the impression, based on what you said so far in our conversation, you're not as big a fan of this as Lady in a Cage, right? But what do you think of Wait Until Dark?
It's okay.
I thought you might say that.
Well, it's a terrific film for sure, but I mean, especially as one of a pair with Lady in a Cage. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I think for me overall, its negatives kind of are very pronounced,
right,
and take away from my viewing pleasure a little bit. But this movie, it has a lot of highlights, though.
It's interesting, isn't it, as well, because compared to Lady in a Cage, this movie is the one that's much more well known and celebrated as a bit of a horror classic. Like, I remember before I ever saw the film, seeing the famous, the jump scare clips and, as being like one of the all-time great scares and that kind of thing. It's like, and, maybe it's a little bit of a safer movie, I suppose, right? It's a bit less daring, it's a bit less subversive than Lady in in a Cage. You could tell this movie felt like a much more kind of mainstream, almost safe home invasion thriller in comparison to Lady in a Cage, I think.
Oh, yeah. Know? I mean, I think part of it is the fact that Olivia de Havilland could do Wait Until Dark. Audrey Hepburn could never do Lady in a Cage.
Right.
You know, yeah. I think I like Audrey Hepburn. I mean, she's obviously one of our most celebrated actresses, but she's there's something a little too patrician about her, I think, for me. Yeah. That it never feels like there's part of me that always knows watching this that she's gonna make it out okay.
Yeah.
Like there even as seedy as some aspects of the movie are, etc. I never feel like she's. And maybe that's just my bias against Audrey Hepburn. I don't know. I don't have some big, she's not my nemesis or anything, but she doesn't do it really for me as an actress.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know what you mean about her. I think she's good in this. And I think I know what you mean about the character. There's something that can be a little bit frustrating about the character. But I generally think Audrey Hepburn is pretty good. Although you're right, you know, by this point in her career, she was this big, beautiful star, wasn't she? You know, she had been in Breakfast at Tiffany's, Roman Holiday. Already she was such a huge household name in this movie. And yeah, you know, as opposed to Olivia de Havilland, who was also a big household name in Lady in a Cage, you can't quite imagine Audrey Hepburn kind of being as weird and creepy or crawling across a pavement screaming, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, she is pretty terrific in Wait Until Dark. I think it was a nominated performance. And all. She definitely has her moments, but her character is kind of...
She's quite infantilized, isn't she? I think that's quite a weird thing about this movie and the way she's portrayed. And I know, you know, it's always that thing where it's trying to work it out. Where is the movie kind of saying something about that, about the way in which all of these men are treating her and potentially underestimating her, right? Or is it just that that's how she's written and that's how Audrey Hepburn's playing her? I kind of go back and forth about that every time I watch this film.
Yeah, it's strange because she does feel completely infantilized, but at the same time her husband is pushing her to be so independent and all of that, but it comes across in a way that it's like, did I do good, Daddy?
Exactly. She even says, doesn't she? She's like, what did she say? She says something like, I came top of the class at school today, or something like that.
Yeah, I was the best in blind school.
Yeah.
Am I a world champion blind lady? It's just, it's a little weird. And I think the relationship with her husband bugs me a lot.
Yes, so. I know what you mean, totally. It's a very odd dynamic.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting thing that I've discovered from doing these films, this series, is that a lot of these movies focus on not just women, but maybe sort of women who are differently abled in some way. Like Spiral Staircase was about a mute woman, and we've had obviously Lady in a Cage, who is a woman who can't walk, and then we've got Wait Until Dark about a blind woman, and then, you know, you skip forward to Mike Flanagan's Hush, a home invasion movie about a deaf woman, right? And it's a really interesting trend I've suddenly noticed, that there are these focuses in on not just women being vulnerable, but almost extra vulnerable, I suppose, by giving them something like that as part of the story, you know?
Yeah, I think when you asked if I wanted to do this, I think I said, do you mean the original or the remake? And it's like, I don't think there is a remake. I was just thinking of that movie See No Evil with Mia Farrow, where she is also a blind woman who is beset upon by hooligans.
Yes, I've not actually seen that movie, but yes, I forgot about that one. Yeah.
That one, and this whole thing brought to mind also, are you doing Sorry, Wrong Number?
I'm not actually, no.
At all doing that would pair great with Wait Until Dark.
It would actually, wouldn't it? Yeah, I was thinking that. I actually thought, oh, maybe I need to throw that in somewhere. But yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah, that'd be a great double feature with Wait Until Dark. But yes, it's kind of like, okay, we have to have women in peril. Obviously, men are never in peril. It's got to be the women. But what's even more weak than a regular woman?
Yes.
A woman with an infirmity. You can't go, let's just have a baby in peril, because, you know, you can't just have that. So let's just get women who are on the level of a baby.
Right.
Because they can't see, they can't hear, they can't walk. they are infirm in some capacity to just make them that much more vulnerable to circumstances.
Right. Well, even like the fact that her sort of best friend and ally in this film is a literal child, like a schoolgirl, right? As well.
Right.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose it also, when they emerge victorious, it also makes them that much more courageous and their fortitude that much stronger, that they can overcome a lot of adversity. I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? What do you think of the story then, and the way that this movie plays out? These kind of, all these kind of con men and drug dealers, and this whole kind of very sort of MacGuffin-y story, right? Of the kind of the hidden drugs inside the back of the doll, which is in a safe potentially, and all of that kind of thing. Yeah,
this is another one that really feels predictive in that it's like, 67, 68, and then like 69, the summer of love and the height of the hippie era and all of this. And Alan Arkin's character really kind of fits into that sort of, are you a beatnik or a hippie, or like, what's going on here? But I'm always, this is so stupid, but I'm always shocked by such, and this isn't necessarily an early reference by any means, but heroin to me always feels like it was invented in the 90s.
Agreed. I thought the same thing. It's like, what? I thought this was Trainspotting was invented heroin.
Right, exactly. Or Calvin Klein or somebody like, so what are they doing in 67? They had heroin? So like that, I clutched my pearls.
I know.
Mike. I couldn't believe it. But yeah, the whole thing, it feels, you mentioned it earlier, but this is definitely a movie that feels like a filmed play.
Yeah.
With the guys coming in and out, disguises. I'm like, it's fucking noises off. Yeah. Like,
Yes, exactly.
Like all their schemes of like, hello, madam. No, I'm not related to the man who was just here a moment ago.
Yes,
it's like,
I know, it's a bit Scooby-Doo or something, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Alan Arkin has his like makeup kit in the car where he's like, oh, hold on, I gotta put the chin putty on.
I was right, you silly thing. And now I've got the proof. You tell Simon to leave her alone or I'll fix him. Good and proper.
It's interesting, like there is stuff that I find really interesting about it, because you do almost find yourself, like, the film deliberately kind of aligns us with them and not with her in that regard, right? We know everything that she doesn't for the most part throughout the film, and I do like that almost tension of at the beginning when they're in her apartment for the first time and she walks in and they all have to freeze, and you're almost wanting them to get away with it in that moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there is something interesting about the way in which the film does kind of align us with these con men, at least in the sort of first half before they really go out and out evil.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that scene, that early scene is so tense.
It's so good.
Of like when she can just sense that there's someone in the house. Like, they're being silent. It's not like they tripped over something or whatever. She can just sense that she's not alone.
Yes.
And it's completely terrifying.
Gloria, I know you're there.
It's very Hitchcock, right? This whole film feels so Hitchcock to me. The kind of single location, the woman in trouble, and that kind of Hitchcockian tension where we know she's in danger, we can see the danger, the bomb under the table, right? But she can't. And that's what this film does so well. You're right, that moment when she's going, Gloria, are you there? Because she can sense there is someone in her apartment, and only we know that it's actually 3 dangerous men who are all trying to stay as quiet as possible, and that bubbling tension just builds throughout, I think, and that's what this film is really good at, I think, is kind of building that tension as it kind of ramps up towards the end. I
like all of those moments that are always peppered throughout the movie. I just love it when she hears some like Rote's shoes. She can hear the squeak, or she just notices, oh, this window is open or whatever. It's just, it's really great. It's really great stuff.
Really good. Yeah, exactly. And I and it's those moments of kind of quiet is when this film is at its best, and when the body is hanging in the closet, and you know they're there to pick up the body, and then she kind of comes home and you see her open the closet and she's right there next to the dead body, and the way it's framed and everything is I love all of that stuff. You know, that is a really creepy sequence, you know?
Right. Oh yeah. It's that's the good stuff. I think it just like you see now talking about it, I'm like, yeah, this movie's great.
Well, I know what you mean. I mean, it is great. I do think this is a really great movie, but I know what you mean too. I think especially off the back of Lady in a Cage, which was so rich and so creepy and so... it felt dangerous, I think, whereas this movie, for all of its tension, it feels very safe, right? I said this about Dial M for Murder. It reminds me a bit of Dial M for Murder. They both have this... in fact, they're based on plays by the same people, I believe. They're both based on plays by Frederick Knott. And they have that same vibe where, yes, it's scary, but also you could sort of watch it with your grandma, right? Like, you could. It feels like a sort of Sunday afternoon sort of TV play, almost. And that's not to say that the film doesn't look like it's well directed, because it is, but I think it feels safe.
Right, yeah. And Audrey Hepburn is very frequently in kind of a soft focus.
Yes, yeah.
And so just, you know, her moments of peril where there's like she'll grip the back of a chair and be like, no,
yes.
no, while she just looks impeccable. Like, it's just, you know, it's definitely, it just plays it safe a lot, I think. And then you have the three villains who are doing... they're like rehearsing for their improv troupe or something. Like they just have this incredible, every scene is like, well, yes, my father, you see, was born in 1930. It's like, just come in and look for the doll.
I know.
You know?
And you've got like Alan Arkin, who's the more like, you know, dangerous one. Also weird seeing, I still find it weird seeing him with hair ever, Alan Arkin.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you've got him as dangerous, and you've got the other two where you've got the one that's called, you know, that they always call Sergeant, who's kind of like the slightly more, he's like, oh, gee, boss, you know, like slightly more kind of lackey almost, you know. And they just feel they certainly feel a lot less threatening than James Caan and his gang, don't they? I think that's the thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think the fact, like, to contrast it with Lady in a Cage also, but it's something I noticed just independently watching it, is that the world outside may as well not even exist in this movie.
Yes.
And I think that's part of what lends it to feeling like a stage production is, and part of Lady in a Cage, part of the point was that there was this active, busy world outside. But in Wait Until Dark, it's like, this is supposed to be in New York, I assume, and like... the street is constantly silent and empty.
Yeah.
No one walks by that she can, you know, hear their feet and try to get help. It's just, it feels like a soundstage from beginning to end.
Yeah, and that moment, there are moments where, you know, she is trapped. Like, oh, there's people stood outside the front door of the building, so she can't leave. But also, like, I'm like, well, you're in a busy apartment, and they've disconnected the phone or whatever, but I'm like, but you're in a busy apartment block, presumably. Like, there's a schoolgirl upstairs, presumably her parents might be in, or someone else might be in. Like, you could go and ask for help from someone, right? And, like, I feel like that is the only thing about it that even the story slightly falls down for me in that regard, because I'm like, well, there's probably another way out of this, I think. You could just get out of that apartment and go to another apartment and ask for help. You know?
Right. Yeah. Scream once.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Just give it a shot.
Just give it a shot. I do love Gloria, though. Little weirdo schoolgirl. Slightly sadistic schoolgirl, Gloria.
Boy, oh boy. I'm still convinced that she is the type of child who will set ants on fire with a magnifying glass.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly that.
But I do love her, and I love how excited she is for a dangerous caper.
Oh my god, there's that amazing line when she's like, I wish this could happen every day.
Yeah. Yeah. She's definitely like, she feels like she's kind of ripped out of Alice, Sweet Alice, to me.
Yes, exactly.
You know, one of those just shitty kids. You know?
I know. Yeah, like she and Susie like hate each other at the beginning, don't they? It's so funny when she's kind of, before we meet Gloria and Susie's like moaning about her and really kind of slagging her off, and we're like, oh, who is this Gloria going to be? And then it turns out to be this like 12-year-old. You're like, oh, right.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like a housekeeper or some kind of like a visiting nurse or something like that, and then it's like a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
And then Gloria starts, you're like, oh, actually, Gloria's a menace.
Yes.
Okay, I see Susie's point. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it.
I love it. What do you think of the apartment, of this setting? Like you said, we barely leave. We barely see the outside world. This is a single location film, basically. In comparison to the kind of the production design of the big house in Lady in a Cage, I think this is kind of interesting because it's a small apartment, but they do really make use out of every inch of this space, right? Whether it's, every prop, every element of that apartment gets used, whether it's the washing machine or the fridge or, tables and chairs, the little cupboard under the stairs, the bathroom, the windows, the pipes.
Yeah. Oh, somewhere Chekhov is beaming.
Yeah.
Yep, you use that washing machine, didn't you? Yep. Yeah, I will say they make good use of the space that they're in, but it just isn't as dynamic, I guess.
Yeah.
As something else. But I appreciate one very ridiculous detail that I noticed that I really, really appreciated is that everything is slightly grubby.
Yes. It is, isn't it?
The paint it's like things are dirty and it all looks used. And I appreciated that it wasn't all spick and span, super nice apartment.
Me too. And it's cluttered, right, as well. There is constantly stuff being knocked over and stuff everywhere. And obviously that adds to this feeling of, oh God, this blind woman is by herself in this place. And it does feel like, in Lady in a Cage, apart from the cage, obviously, it felt so spacious, didn't it?
Yes.
Big, massive kind of central kind of area with the big staircase going up and everything. It was high ceilings and big rooms, and this feels claustrophobic in a way, which I think is what works really well for those moments of tension and horror that come later on.
Right. Yeah, you get the idea that this couple has outgrown this space, but for whatever reason, they're still in it.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe because she needs familiar surroundings now, or who knows.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think I was interested in that and how, it must be so much easier in a way to tell a horror story in a big old house than it is in a small, pokey New York apartment, right? And, when movies do that really well, like Rosemary's Baby or whatever, it's really interesting to see the way in which the space is used in kind of small apartment blocks and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one, there's really nowhere for her to hide from them or anything. So I definitely appreciate that.
So let's talk about the horror itself then. That last sequence with Alan Arkin kind of attacking her and the way the tension ramps up and her turning off all the lights and everything. What do you think of this moment? Because were you like me? Were you aware of these moments before you ever saw the film? Because I remember seeing all those moments in things like Bravo's 100 Scariest Moments and all of that kind of thing,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The seeing them in context is so wonderful.
Yeah.
And whatever my feelings about this film, all of the sort of the climax, the extended climax of this movie is really incredible stuff.
Incredible.
When she, one of the things I do love about her character, about Susie, is the ways that how clever she is throughout this, and using all of those audio cues, or why was the detective wiping everything? Why was he wiping everything with a towel? She's so observant, and I love that. And then when she turns and uses the darkness to her advantage, when she breaks all of the light bulbs and all that, and then when it goes pitch black and even the audience, we can't see anything. It's just it's as good as it gets, really.
It's so good, isn't it? And yeah, you're right. I love those little audio punctuation moments throughout the film that kind of let us know, or let Susie know, what's going on. So there's a moment that I think that is just as powerful a scare in a low-key way, just slightly earlier on, when she discovers that Mike, who she's trusted throughout the whole film, is actually one of the villains, right? Because he gives her a phone number to call him on, and she knows that the villains are across the road using the payphone, but obviously she can't see what they look like. And so she says to Gloria, if you see anyone using that payphone, call me and let the phone ring twice and then hang up, and that'll be the signal that I know they're using the payphone. And she speaks to Mike on the phone, and she confides in him and tells him where the dough is hidden, and he says, right, I'm on my way to you now. She hangs up the phone, and then her phone rings twice, and this is when the realization hits her that even Mike is against her and that she is completely alone. It's a really great, fun little moment of like just simple audio, right? Suddenly really ramping up that tension.
Yes. Oh yeah, because we're discovering all of these. Like, we know these things, but part of the joy is watching her discover all of this and realize just how much danger she's actually in.
Oh, so good. And then, so let's go back to that final confrontation between her and Alan Arkin, right? This moment in the dark. They have this almighty scuffle. She covers him in gasoline. She's got a lit match, so she's kind of got one over on him. Then she manages to stab him. We think he's dead, right? His body is lying somewhere in the apartment in amongst all the clutter in the pitch black. She can't get out of the front door because it's chained shut. And then we have that almighty jump scare as he comes back from the dead. What do you... Now, I'm really fascinated in talking about jump scares because, you know, there's so many jump scares that are considered the all-time greats, you know, like The Exorcist 3, like Carrie's hand coming out of the grave. And then there are other jump scares that people will accuse of being cheap, right? Like moments from the Paranormal Activity sequels or whatever it might be. But I'm really intrigued to know, like, what, in people's opinion, makes a good jump scare and what makes a cheap jump scare. And what is it about this scare in Wait Until Dark that you think makes it so effective?
I think it must have blown people's minds.
Yeah, don't you wish you could have been with an audience at the time? Yeah,
I really do, because it's so unexpected. And nowadays, it's the big surprises when we don't get the cheap jump scare.
Right, yes, exactly. It's when we get the Ari Aster, Toni Collette is on the ceiling kind of reveal, right? And that's what people prefer now,
Yeah. It's, you know, watching something and expecting... Okay, there's going to be one more. Oh, no, it's the credits. Okay. Yeah. All right. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. But to see, like, this is a classic. This is Jason Voorhees coming out of the lake at the end of part one,
exactly.
Friday the 13th, part one, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's the combination of so many things of, like, at the time especially, 68, 67, we did not expect this to happen. The fact that he leaps at her, which is crazy.
Yes, I think that's what it is, right? It's his movement as well. It's not just like he walks into frame. It's like he's flying through the air.
Yeah, for somebody who was just stabbed and we thought he was dead a second ago. Yeah, he makes one final, like, Hail Mary dive at her.
Yeah, he's jumping. It's a literal jump scare, isn't it? Like, he's leaping.
Yeah, and he's leaping out of complete blackness.
Yeah.
Like, right out of the dark. So, bam, he jumps into frame, and you get the incredible Henry Mancini string sting.
Yes.
And it's just like all of these things together combined to perfect. It's just perfect.
So good, isn't it? It is one of the greats, I think. Like, it is up there. In a weird way, it sort of reminds me a bit of the Exorcist 3 one, where it's kind of very wide shot and something is coming out of one side of the frame from a place you're not necessarily expecting, you know? That kind of, like, horizontal kind of bursting into the frame, you know? And
right.
Those ones work really well, I think. You know, they sort of... I don't know why they sort of feel cleverer than somebody just an extreme close-up on somebody as they turn around and somebody's behind them or something like that.
Right, yeah, seeing it from the side versus seeing it behind somebody.
Yes, yeah.
Or, like, behind them in the mirror, or behind the mirror when I close it.
Oh,
you know,
my God.
like...
Do you remember when about 800 films did that? Oh, in the 2000s particularly. It was like, oh, my God. Yeah.
And now they're still doing it, except when you close it, there's nobody there. Oh, I thought there was going to be somebody there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got me again, but in a different way, I guess.
Because another one that always gets me like that as well is Psycho. Like, and it's not the shower scene, but it's Arbogast getting killed at the top of the stairs from that aerial shot, you know, where Norman Bates suddenly comes from the side of the frame in that overhead shot. Like, it's something about, I don't know, like, not expecting him to emerge from that side or something that I remember it really making me jump when I first saw that scene particularly, like, more than the shower scene in Psycho. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's like, we have more, just, it's a matter of maybe 1 or 2 seconds at most, but we have more time to kind of really soak in what's happening. Like in Exorcist 3, you know, versus if it was just, oh, they popped up behind and killed her and like, oh boy, that almost gave me a heart attack. Yes. But it's over. Versus watching it happen, and so you're having the extended heart attack reaction.
That one is so, again, extra, isn't it? That Exorcist one, because it's like, you're right. It's like we're watching 5 minutes of just silence, and then that crash zoom and that like, oh, like, it's like, oh my god.
Oh, that's good stuff.
So
that's good
stuff,
stuff,
isn't it? So good. Yeah, and this is one of the things, I think for all of their flaws, James Wan's movies are good at say what you want about James Wan, he's good at a jump scare occasionally, I think. Like that's one of the things that he's very good at executing, is a good jump scare.
Oh yeah, well it's if you couldn't experience Friday the 13th in 1980 or whatever, like that's another one where it's like, oh, I would have loved to have seen that, like where Jason pops out of the lake. It's like you don't expect it. Nowadays, especially horror viewers, we're so seasoned that you can tell when a shot is set up, something is going to happen.
Yes.
Something is going to happen here. And so when a director, like James Wan, I'll give James Wan that kind of credit, okay?
That's really hurting you, isn't it? I mean, I know what you mean. I'm not the biggest James Wan fan in the world, but I do think he knows how to pull off a jump scare, right?
Yeah, and so when we get this shot and something's going to happen, and when they can surprise you in a new way, or just come at it from a different angle, or they know how to manipulate that tension, like manipulate us and extend the tension or whatever.
Yeah. It's good.
It's great.
It's good.
Yeah.
And James Wan's mate, what's his name? Lee Whannell, who made The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. I thought those had some great moments too, of kind of using the empty space of, is this man in the room with you kind of thing. And that was kind of, again, like using the geography in a really interesting way. I think so much of it comes down to kind of framing and the geography, often with jump scares, like the really good ones,
yes.
I mean,
Give us that wide shot. Wide shot. Make me as a viewer look in all the corners to see what's going on in the background.
Oh.
Where's the terror gonna come from?
It's like Paranormal Activity, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah, make me stare at this bedroom for like 10 minutes at a time, and then all we need to do is slightly move a door and everyone shits themselves. It's kind of great when that happens. Yeah.
Right. And some people find that plays off the opposite way for some people of like, oh great, another bedroom shot.
I know. I know. And I definitely did get sick of jump scares and that kind of scare that Paranormal Activity really overdid. Like the kind of let's stare at an empty space relentlessly until a loud noise happens, that did get really exhausting, didn't it? I think. I remember watching, was it like one of the Annabelle films, Annabelle 2 maybe, and I just found myself getting really angry because I was like, I'm getting tense because I know something loud is going to happen at any moment. Oh, this girl's using this stair lift. Something awful is going to be at the top of the stairs. And I knew it was coming, but I was kind of annoyed about it at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got annoyed I tried to watch Smile.
Right. Smile's like that. Exactly. Yeah.
And I got maybe half an hour into it or something, and I just felt like I know what all these scares are going to be. It's just jump scares. Like, I was being irritated at the way it was approaching all of the scares.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because
you turned it off.
Right, well, I get it, because you could still jump, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, I do find myself jumping. The films do work on me, but there's something about those ones that make me angry. Whereas, and again, it's like, other jump scares feel like they were really clever, and it's really interesting to kind of examine like what are the good ones and what are the ones that make me angry.
Right? Yeah. Well, I mean, go up to someone on the street, go up behind them and clap in their ear, and they're gonna get irritated.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
it's easy to give someone a jump scare. But
exactly, especially with the soundtrack, right? With just like a loud noise, that's always going to be the case. Well, it's a Wait Until Dark. It's up there. If anything, it's the jump scare is up there in the Hall of Fame of jump scares, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, maybe I was too harsh on it at the beginning. It has its talky moments that feel like a play.
Yeah, Totally, I totally agree with that. It does feel stagey. It does feel like a play. It's great for what it is, but I think, like you said, especially having watched it straight off the back of Lady in a Cage, right? It doesn't reach those heights, I think.
Oh, I mean, yeah, there are few movies that could compare to Lady in a Cage. So
exactly.
What hope did this one have? But I don't mean to dissuade anybody from watching it. It is certainly formative in several ways, and there's a lot of stuff to really love in it.
There you go, Stacie. Thank you so much. What a joy it's been to discuss these two movies. And I've got to ask you, I've got to finish with the really difficult question, especially as somebody who isn't that big a fan of home invasion movies generally. But what is your favourite movie in this subgenre? Do you have a favourite kind of home invasion or home invasion adjacent movie?
I mean, am I not going to say Lady in a Cage at this point?
Yes.
Because my brain always goes to actual torture if I hear home invasion. It never really occurred to me, but it is absolutely a home invasion movie, and so therefore it's my favorite. Obviously, I also really love Martyrs, and I do consider that a home invasion movie.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
But yeah, I do appreciate You're Next. I think that one's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's one I'm quite looking forward to going back and giving a rewatch, actually. I haven't seen it since it first came out, but I remember it being a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, Stacie, thank you so much. And just before you go, remind people where they can find you, where they can find more Gaylords of Darkness and more Stacie Ponder out there in the world.
Oh, wow. Let's see. Gaylords of Darkness, the podcast, we have new episodes every week, just about. Gaylordsofdarkness.com is our website, but it's on all the podcast platforms. My horror blog is finalgirl.rocks. And you can also find me in the pages of Rue Morgue magazine.
Love it. Stacie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. It's always a pleasure, but
always a pleasure, never a chore.
Yeah.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to this week's brilliant guest, Stacie Ponder. Always such a pleasure to have Stacie on the podcast. So let us know what you thought of this week's movies. I particularly want to hear what people thought of Lady in a Cage, because I feel like it's a movie not enough people have seen, not enough people talk about. So please get in touch. Let me know your thoughts. evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. And don't forget, if you want to discuss this week's episode with fellow listeners, there are two places you can go. You can join the Evolution of Horror discussion group, which you can find on Facebook, or you can join the Evolution of Horror Discord. If you want to be kept up to date with new content and screenings and events, then sign up to our newsletter, evolutionofhorror.com/newsletter. If you want to support the making of this podcast and everything we do here and get treated to regular bonus content, then sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. You can find this podcast in all the usual podcast places, and I'd be so grateful if you could drop us a little rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever app you use, as that really helps us get discovered by new listeners. So, on to next week, and things are just going to get darker and nastier from here, I'm afraid, because next week we move into the gritty, grimy 1970s. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Jamie Graham to discuss two very controversial, previously banned movies featuring prominent home invasions. We're going to be discussing Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange from 1971 and Wes Craven's Last House on the Left from 1972. Just keep telling yourself it's only a movie. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.